For much of the Second World War, Italy's Air Force, Regia Aeronautica, was seen as a junior partner, a force equipped with outdated biplanes and underpowered fighters that were hopelessly outclassed. But what if I told you that in 1941, Italian engineers rolled out a machine so advanced, so lethally beautiful, that it could meet the legendary Spitfire Mark V on near equal terms and dominate its predecessors? Welcome to Historical Digs. For today, we unearth the story of the Macchi C.202 Folgore, or Thunderbolt. On one hand, it was a fighter that held the promise of turning the tide, but on the flip side, it was the perfect machine built by a broken system. An Italian thoroughbred with a German heart. To understand the miracle of the Folgore, you first have to understand the mediocrity it was born from. In 1940, the backbone of Italy's fighter force was the Macchi C.200 Saetta, a rugged monoplane originally with an enclosed canopy but often flown open that was agile but outpaced. Its Achilles heel was its engine. Italian industry, for all its automotive genius, struggled to produce powerful, reliable aircraft engines. The Saetta's Fiat radial engine produced a meager 870 horsepower, leaving it in the dust of the 1,000-plus horsepower Rolls-Royce Merlins and Daimler-Benz engines powering British and German fighters. Italian pilots were brave and skilled, but they were consistently fighting at a disadvantage, their machines unable to dictate the terms of engagement. The solution came not from Milan or Turin, but from Stuttgart. In a moment of pragmatic desperation, Italian leadership secured the license to produce Germany's formidable Daimler-Benz DB601 engine, the same liquid-cooled inverted V12 that powered the Messerschmitt Bf109. The task of manufacturing it fell to Alfa Romeo, who designated their version RA1000 RC41i Monsone. This engine was a game-changer. It was compact, powerful, and allowed for a beautifully streamlined aerodynamic profile that was hard to achieve with the radial of the time. Macchi's chief designer, Mario Castoldi, a master of elegant airframes, was given the task of building a fighter around this German heart. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to Historical Digs. Your support keeps history's forgotten warbirds flying, not in the skies, but in memory. The result was the C.202 Folgore. It was a stunning fusion of Italian design artistry and German engineering muscle. Castoldi took the proven wings and rear fuselage of the earlier C.200 and married them to a new, slender forward fuselage that tapered perfectly around the DB601. The transformation was breathtaking. Where the C.200 was stout and functional, the C.202 was sleek, predatory, and fast. Test flights in the summer of 1940 revealed its incredible potential. The prototype easily exceeded 370 miles per hour, nearly 60 miles per hour faster than its predecessor. Its climb rate was phenomenal, and pilots reported that its handling was perfectly harmonized and exquisitely responsive. For the first time, Italy had a genuinely world-class fighter. The sky belongs to the Folgore. Briefly, when the Folgore entered service in the autumn of 1941, it arrived like a thunderclap. Deployed to the brutal skies over North Africa, it quickly proved itself a dangerous new rival. Allied pilots flying the rugged but aging Curtiss P-40 Warhawk and the Hawker Hurricane found themselves in a terrifying new reality. The C.202 was generally faster, with better dive and climb performance. According to pilot debriefs from both Italian and Commonwealth squadrons, the Folgore could often dictate the fight, diving and climbing away before P-40s or Hurricanes could follow. The ultimate test came against its true benchmark, the Supermarine Spitfire. Over the besieged island of Malta and later in the war, the C.202 frequently went head-to-head with a Spitfire Mark V. While the Spitfire had a slight edge in turning ability at certain altitudes, the Folgore matched its speed and excelled in handling. Ace pilots like Capitano Franco Lucchini, credited with 21 victories, demonstrated just how lethal the Folgore could be in the right hands. Italian pilots finally had a machine that gave them confidence, a thoroughbred that allowed their skill to shine. They praised its exceptional handling at high speed and its stability as a gun platform. For a brief shining period from late 1941 through 1942, the Folgore briefly achieved local superiority in 1941-42, when numbers and circumstances favored it. Its impact was not just tactical, it was psychological. Allied intelligence reports, initially dismissing Italian aircraft, were hastily rewritten. The Folgore was recognized as a first-rate fighter, a dangerous opponent that demanded respect. Its presence helped spur the RAF to rush Spitfire reinforcements to the Mediterranean theater. The Folgore was more than just a successful fighter. It was a symbol of Italian potential, a declaration that when given the right tools, Italian industry and pilots could compete with the very best in the world. But this period of dominance was tragically brief. The Folgore was a magnificent fighting machine, but it carried a fatal and very specific flaw. A boxer with no punch. For all its speed and grace, the Macchi C.202 had a glass jaw and couldn't land a knockout punch. The problem was its armament, which was shockingly inadequate for the era. While its contemporaries were bristling with cannons and batteries of heavy machine guns, the standard Folgore carried just two 12.7mm Breda Safet machine guns mounted in the fuselage, synchronized to fire through the propeller. These weapons were notoriously unreliable. Their rate of fire was sluggish, around 700 rounds per minute, slower and weaker than Allied or German heavy machine guns. Worse, the synchronization gear required to time the bullets between the propeller blades further reduced this rate, a problem endemic to many fuselage-mounted gun systems. The result was a fighter that struggled to bring down its opponents. Pilots often needed prolonged bursts to bring down rugged opponents like the P-40. Against larger targets like bombers, the Folgore was at a serious disadvantage. The Breda Safet's shells lacked the hitting power of cannon rounds, and they often peppered a bomber's airframe without causing critical damage. Some later variants of the Folgore were fitted with two additional 7.7mm machine guns in the wings, but many aircraft omitted them. When used, they were widely regarded as ineffective. The contrast was stark. A Spitfire Mark V typically carried two 20mm cannons and 4.303s, while an American P-38 carried a deadly mix of four 50 cal machine guns and a 20mm cannon. The Folgore was a duelist armed with a rapier, in a war that was increasingly being decided by shotguns. This deficiency was a direct result of Italian pre-war doctrine and industrial limitations. The Regia Aeronautica had prioritized maneuverability and speed over firepower, believing that skilled pilots could achieve kills with precision shots. Furthermore, Italian industry lacked the capacity to mass-produce effective aircraft cannons like the Hispano or the MG-151. This critical failure in armament meant that even when a Folgore pilot achieved a perfect firing position, the outcome was far from certain. They were bringing a knife to a gunfight, a tragic flaw that squandered the magnificent performance of the airframe and cost the lives of many skilled pilots. A masterpiece built in a broken factory. Even if the Folgore had been armed with death rays, it wouldn't have mattered. Its ultimate failure was not in the air, but on the factory floor. Italy's war effort was crippled by a disorganized and inefficient industrial base, and the C-202 program became a prime victim of this systemic chaos. The production of a modern fighter like the Folgore required a complex supply chain, precision engineering, and vast quantities of raw materials, all of which were in short supply in wartime Italy. The numbers tell the story. Between 1941 and the Italian armistice in September 1943, only about 1,100 to 1,200 C-202s were produced by Macchi and its subcontractor Breda. To put that in perspective, during the same period, Germany produced 11,000 Bf-109s and Britain produced over 6,000 Spitfires, compared to barely 1,000 Folgores. The Folgore never arrived in the numbers needed to make a strategic difference. Squadrons were often operating with a handful of aircraft, and replacements for combat losses were slow to arrive, if they arrived at all. This meant that even when the Folgore was technically superior to its opponents, the Allies could simply overwhelm it with sheer numbers. The problems ran deep. The license-built Alfa Romeo DB601 engine, while a brilliant design, was complex and difficult to manufacture. Production was slow and plagued by quality control issues. Italy's industry was decentralized, relying on small workshops for many components, which created endless bottlenecks. Allied bombing raids further disrupted the fragile supply chain. The C-202 was a handcrafted masterpiece in an era that demanded mass production. It was eventually succeeded by the C-205 Veltro, essentially a Folgore re-engined with a DB605 and in later series armed with two 20mm wing cannons in addition to heavy machine guns. The Valtro was a truly formidable fighter, arguably one of the best of the entire war, but by the time it arrived in 1943, it was far too little, far too late. It was a perfect final act to a tragedy of industrial failure. The Folgore story is a stark lesson that in modern warfare, the most brilliant designs are useless if you can't build them, arm them, and deploy them in overwhelming numbers. So what is the final verdict on the Macchi C.202 Folgore? It was a fighter that proved Italian designers could create a machine to rival the best in the world. It gave its pilots a fighting chance and earned the respect of its enemies, but it was also a promise that could never be fulfilled. A weapon crippled by poor firepower and an industrial base incapable of supporting it. Was the Folgore a fearsome weapon that just needed a chance, or was it, for all its beauty, ultimately insignificant in the larger course of the war? Let us know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to join us on the next historical dig. Until then, remember, history is full of hidden gems if you know where to dig.